You are listening to WTUZ Radio Podcast. Welcome to WTUZ Radio Podcast. I am your host, Rhonda, and today's episode or podcast is time speeding up? So in this episode, we are going to discuss what does time mean? What does the concept of time mean? Is time really speeding up? And we'll also go through how time and the precession of the equinox are related. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started. So what I like to do when I go into a topic, I like to start with the etymology dictionary. So the etymology of a particular word on the topic that we're discussing. So let's look at the etymology of the word time, which is a noun. So it says time, Old English, time, limited space of time, from Proto-Germanic timon, time, source of all or Old Norse timey, time, proper time, Swedish time, an hour from pi, suffix form of root da, to divide. Abstract sense of time as an indefinite continuous duration is recorded from the late 14th century. Personified at least since 1509 as an bald man with a forelock carrying a scythe of an hourglass. So I guess what they're really saying is that image that they show today of quote, quote, Father Time, walking with the hourglass. In English, a single word encompasses time as extend and point. So French, temps, fois, as well as hour, as in what time is it? Extended senses such as occasion, the right time, leisure, multiplied by, developed in Old and Middle English, probably as natural outgrowth of such phrases as he commends her 100 times of God. All right, and then they also give to have a good time equals a time of enjoyment was common in English from 1520 to 1688. It was retained in America, once readopted in Britain in the 19th century. And then they go into time of day, now mainly preserved in negation, what someone won't give you if he doesn't like you. So in other words, they're given the slang of time. He won't give you the time of day, or she won't give you the time of day. And then they also go to the times. The current age is from 1590s. Behind the times, old fashioned. That was recorded in 1831. Times as the name of a newspaper dated 1788. And then they also go into time warp, first attested in 1954. Time traveling in science fiction since first recorded in 1895 in H.G. Wells' The Time Machine. And Time Castle first recorded in 1938 in reference to the one deemed capable of resisting the effects of time for 5,000 years, preserving an account of universal achievement embedded in the grounds of the New York Fair. All right. So then they also describe time as a verb, Old English, to happen, befall, from time. noun meaning to appoint a time of an action is attested from the 1300s sense of measure or record the time. A race event, etc., is first attested in the 1600s. Okay, so, and then they were saying the concept of time span was 1897 from time, so meaning time, and then plus span, all right? So just wanted to give you a quick etymology of the word time. So as you can see, it kind of is all over the place. It does describe some sense of measurement, also in describing from one point to another point, to divide, and then even they get into some slang use of the word as well. All right, so let's move on from that. So let's discuss the concept of time being an illusion. I know those of you that are in the spiritual community or metaphysics, you always hear folks say that time is an illusion. So let's go to an article from Learning Mind, and this is called The Illusion of Time. Physics reveals time is not real. So, according to certain theories in physics, the time is not real and nothing but a product of our consciousness. Let's explore these theories and the concept of illusions of time. Our daily experience, as well as our predecessors, regards time as a flowing entity that defines what we conceive to be the past and what we conceive as the future. Time is something that is directly linked to our brain's consciousness abilities. Our mind records what we have seen in the past and can also retrieve it. So we're going to stop right there. So if you are joining us on the Truth Uncompromised show on the YouTube lives that we do every Thursday, and they're also recorded on YouTube, we are doing a series called Mama Terra and the Consciousness of Her People. It is literally about the study of consciousness, the power of consciousness. One of our main sources for that series is a study that was done by the U.S. Army, Department of Army, on the study of consciousness. And in that particular study, they admit that time, how we measure time, really is all one. So meaning the concept of the now, the past, and the future are really one thing. And the only distinguishing difference between the three, the now, the past, and the future, are based on a vibration frequency that your consciousness can tap into. All right? So we'll get a little deeper into that. In our daily experiences, our mind cannot construct what is going to happen in the future. In Newton's classic mechanics, that has been the masterpiece of classic physics since its introduction in 1640, time is defined as an absolute characteristic of the universe. Independent from our location, it is regarded as a straight passage of events that defines past, present, and future. And of course, that is still what is being taught today in some cases. Later developments in 1905 and later in 1917, with the introduction of Einstein's theory of relativity, special theory of relativity, and general theory of relativity, the idea of absoluteness of time received a heavy blow, and it was proved that there was no absolute time. Now, I find that absolutely interesting that they're saying that was discovered in the 1917, but yet we are still being taught, the general populace is still being taught that time is a series of linear events. So meaning past, present, and future. So I want y'all to think about that for a minute. In 1640, Newton came up with time being linear, meaning past, present, and future. But as late as 1917, that theory came into question when it was said that the idea of absoluteness of time received a heavy blow, and it was proved that there was no absolute time. Indeed, it was proved that the time difference between two events totally depends on such parameters as speed, gravitational field at the location of the observer, and that two simultaneously events for an observer would not be simultaneous for other observers. Quantum mechanics went even further and suggested that time is a discrete property and there is no continuous time, with the quantum of time being of the order of 10 to the negative 43rd. So, in other words, to just break this down into plain language, when it says the difference, it was proved that time difference between two events totally depend on such parameters as speed, gravitational field. They are describing vibratory / frequency. So what is the speed of that frequency? That's what's determining whether or not you are past, present, and future are all one and the same. So not the linear that's being still taught this today as past, present, and future, but it is the speed or the frequency. In this interpretation, time is still regarded as reality. Okay, so let me back up and stop with this. Now, those of you that have rocked with me for some years on Truth Uncompromised show, I always give the account of a gentleman who made such a powerful statement. Wow, this was years ago. This is probably going on probably 7 years at this point. That if you look at the word time, if you spell time backwards, it is emit. So meaning emit a frequency. Okay? So in other words, the frequency or time is regarded as reality. So in this interpretation, time is still regarded as reality, and the statistical interpretation of causality principle within the framework of the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle is still respected. However, recent discoveries at the quantum level are now directing us to the idea of the illusion of time and the conclusion that time actually may not exist, and that it exists only with regards to an arbitrary reference point. So in other words, it's based on what frequency you're tuned into, i.e. your consciousness, what your consciousness, and I like to say your soul consciousness, is tuned into, and what events you have recorded. All right, and we'll get into that a little bit more on the record situation. In order to make it simple, let us have a comparison between space and time coordinate. It is a fact that the notion of left and right is a relative concept that depends on the location of the observer. So the concept of right and left cannot be absolute property for defining the location of objects. Left and right are relative and not absolute, since they may be in reverse order for another observer looking at the same set of objects. Generalizing the same concept of time coordinates as the fourth dimension will lead us to the result that the past and the future may indeed be reversed for another observer at a different reference point. This simple comparison can be best described in a picture that is named Block Universe, which is presented below. So I am going to describe what they mean to make this simple. So let's say you have a block that's drawn in like a 4D. And in the middle of that block, you have a square that's called now. And then on one side of that block, you have past. And then on the other side of that block, you have future. Now, if I am, let's say, standing on the future side of the now wall, that means I can't see the past. I'm in the now, but in the now, I'm only facing the future. So I can't see the past. The past is still there. I just can't see it. Now let's reverse it. Let's say I'm in the now, but I'm facing the past. Let's say I'm just facing the past. The future is still there. It's on the other side. But because I'm facing the past, all I can see is I know that I'm in the now and I can see the past. So that's what they mean where the reference of time is based on someone's or the observer's reference point or perspective. So to put this in spiritual or metaphysics perspective, they are basically saying based on what frequency you are tuned into in the now is what you can have access to. Now, the other thing is if you want to see past, now, and future, you would either have to be floating above the block universe. So in other words, you are stepping outside of space, or what they're calling the space-time continuum or formula. So if you're hovering above the block, you can see the entire block, you can see the past, you can see the now, you can see the future, all at once. If you are stepping outside of the space time box, and they're calling it the block universe, you could also still see everything at the same time. You could see the past, the now, and the future. Okay? So this gets into when you are doing either transcendental meditation, and or if you are astro traveling, okay? And those of us that are following the series on Mama Terra and the consciousness of her people, we call that the click out. So you're clicking out of the time-space continuum and you can see it all, right? That's based on your frequency. All right. So, I'll read what they're saying, but we kind of went over it. But this is the view of the universe by an observer outside of space and time, looking from a vantage point of our universe. In this picture, past and future are not absolute, rather they depend on the reference point of the observer. So in other words, where is the observer located? Or in other words, what is the observer tuned to from a vibratory frequency standpoint? In this theory, the concept of past and future for time are as relative as the concept of right and left for location. All right, which makes sense because we can be looking at the same thing, but if we're facing different ways, our left and right are reversed, right? So that's another way to look at it. To listen to this episode in its entirety, go to anchor.fm/WTUZ radio. Again, that's anchor.fm/WTUZ radio. And the link is in the description. Thank you and peace and love.